Hello, for today's video, we will be talking about phonology, the sound pattern of languages. So, what do you think is greater? Is it the number of languages in the world or the number of speech sounds in all of those languages? So, there seem to be thousands of languages, but just a few hundred speech sounds, as we have looked in the previous modules. Even more amazing is the fact that only a few dozen characteristics, such as voicing and bilabial, are required to define every spoken sound that occurs in every human. So, phonology is the study of how language sounds generate patterns. These patterns can be just as simple as the failure to start a syllable in English or as complex as why G is silent in sign, yet pronounced in or yet pronounced by the word signature associated with it. So in order to find out that this is a model and not a nuanced exception, consider the slippery N in fall and autumn, or the illusory in B in bomb and bombardment. So the pronunciation of morphemes. Knowledge in phonology regulates how the words and portions of the words we call morphemes are spoken, so some morphemes are often pronounced differently depending on their circumstances, and the way to describe this variance with phonological principles is introduced. So we can start with a few examples in English. Mm, so the pronunciation of plurals. Almost every English has a plural form. For example, the cat, its plural form is cats, and dog or dogs, fox and foxes. But have you ever taken care to pronounce plural forms? So if you listen to a native speaker of American, or if you are one, we can speak the following substantials. So in the table, the final sound of the plural nouns from column A is Z. It is a voice alveolar fricative. For column B, the plural ending is an S, or it's a voiceless alveolar fricative. And for column C, it's easy. Here is your first example of a morpheme with different pronunciations. Note that also there is irregularity in columns A, B, and C that does not exist in D. So the plural forms in D for child is children, ox is oxen, and mice for mouse. For criteria, it's criteria, and sheep is also for sheep. So they are a hodgepodge of special cases that are memorized individually when you want to acquire English. So whether natively or as a second language, this is because there is no way to predict the plural forms of these words, right? So how do we know to pronounce this plural morpheme? The spelling which adds s or es is misleading. As a insight, yet if you know English, you pronounce it as, of course, as we indicated. So when faced this type of question, it's useful to make a chart that records the phonological environments in which each variant of the morpheme is known to occur. The more technical term for a variant of a morpheme is allomorph. So writing the words from the first three columns in broad phonetic transcription. So we have our first chart to the plural morpheme. So this is our chart. Um, to discover the pattern behind the way plurals are pronounced, we look for some property of the environment associated with each group of allomorphs. For example, what is it about cab or love that determines the plural morpheme will take the form Z rather than S or S? So we search for a minimal pair in our word list in order to direct our research. So a minimal pair is two words with identical meanings. For example, cab and the cat are a minimal pair with which only diverge in their final segment, whereas the cat and mud. So, minimal pairs with various allomers are very helpful in our search. So consider, for example, the cab and cap, which take Z and S as a plural, respectively. So the last piece is obviously responsible because the two words diverge there. The bag and badge. Similarly, in the final portions, the different plural Z and Z are determined. So the spread of plural allomorphs appears to be determined in English by the last component of singular form. True only the final portion. So we make our chart more accurate. So we regard individual segments of diphthongs like taking, okay, like talking. So we now wish to understand why this pattern is followed by the English plural. So we always answer such questions by checking the phonetic features of the packaging pieces such as a survey. It demonstrates that the segments which trigger the plural easy share the trait of being sibilants in common. So the voiceless segments are the plural S non-sibilants, and whereas the voice segments are the plural Z. More generally, the rules can be specified so as Z are they are after voice non-sibilant segments. S is the voiceless sibilant segments, and EZ is the sibilant segments. Uh, an even more concise way to express these rules is to assume that the basic of or underlying form of the plural morpheme is Z with the meaning plural. So this is the default pronunciations. The rules so there are two rules which tells us when the default does not apply. So so based on these two rules, these rules derive plural for all regular substances from the phonetic form. This means pronunciation since the plural basic shape is Z. If there is no rule, the Z plural morpheme is realized. So the following diagram, so the next diagram, or I'll present you a diagram how bus, but, and bug plurality are generated. So the basic shapes are at the top as one progress down. So both apply or do not apply accordingly. So the rule 1 output becomes the rule 2 input. The phonetic realizations are at the bottom, the matter in which the words are spoken. So this is the diagram. So as we have formulated these rules, so number 1 must apply before 2, but see exercise 6 for at the end of the module if we apply the rules in reverse order. So we have some exercise. We would derive an incorrect phonetic form of the plural of bus as a diagram similar to the previous. So this diagram will illustrate um, similarity to the previous diagram. So additional examples of allomorphs. So the development of the regular tense or the past tense of the English verbs parallels a regular form forming like the plural form, or some irregular past tense conform not to particular rule and must be learned individually, such as um, go or went, sing, sung, and hit. And also like the plural, there are three phonetic past tense morphemes or four irregular verbs like the, to, and ed. Here are several, so I'm going to show you some examples in broad phonetic transcriptions. So study sets, we must study the sets. So here is um the examples. Study sets A and B and C and try to see the regularity before the reading. So let's try to see. So for set A, it suggests that if the verb finishes in T or D, ed is added. It is similar to the insertion of easy to form the plural of non-certain in sibilants. So set B suggests that if the verb ends in a voice segment other than D, we add a voice D. Set C shows us that if the verb ends in a voiceless segment other than T, we add a voiceless T. So here the the rules for regular verb creation are similar to the rules for the pluralizations of a regular noun. So here is the two rule. Okay, so uh, so the possessive morpheme and the single morpheme of the third person spelled S or ES are two more allomorphs in English. So the same phonetic form for the plural morpheme is followed by the same regularization. So add Z to the ship, add add Z to a woman, and add Z to judge, so that she gets a judge. So to judge, add Z, the verb feeds, needs, and rushes with a final S, whose third person unique shapes or S, and the verb rustling with final. Next is English, not only language that has morphemes that are pronounced differently in different logical environments. So many languages have morpheme variation that can be described by rules similar to the ones we have written for English. So for example, the negative morpheme in the West African language Akan has three nasal morphemes: m before p, n before t, and ng before k, as the following examples show. So the me here means I, so me pe or I like, me pe I don't like, me ti or I speak, and min ti I don't speak, and me ko or I go, and min ko I go. So this describes the rule that the distribution of allomorph f change the place of articulation of the nasal negative morpheme to agree with the place of articulation of a following consonant. So let's proceed to the phonological units of language. So the rules express our knowledge about okay, so the native speaker and listener actualize in the real world and are sensitive to sounds, but what we feel is phonemes. Only a paradigm morphemes can be subject to phonological rules outlined in the previous section. So however, other sound phonology regulations apply as they happen in any language morphemes. These rules convey our understanding of the whole language sounds patterns. Okay. The concepts of phoneme and allophones are presented in this section. So phonemes are the fundamental form of mentally sensed sound, not spoken or listened. So to each phoneme, a mental abstraction itself is expressed orally by one or more sounds called the allophones. So which correspond to the phoneme in different situations. For example, phoneme has p, has an allophone speaking suction like ph and pip, but no suction in p in speech or spit. The phoneme employ phonological principles to express which allophones are declared and which circumstances. Okay, so we have here the of illustrations of allophones. English contains a general phonological rule that determines the context in which vowels are naturalized. I think we have already noted that in Module 5 that both oral and nasal vowels occur phonetically in English. So the following are example here. Bin or bean, bid, roam, and robe. So taking oral vowels as basic, that is the phonemes we have phonological rule that states. So here's the rule again. Vowels are nasalized before a nasal consonants within the same syllable. So this rule demonstrates our English pronunciation knowledge. Nasalized vowel occur exclusively before and never thereafter nasal consonants. So So table 6.1 shows the effect of these rules as seen in the table. Oral vowels occur in English and before the nasal consonants, so nasal vowels only occur before the nasal consonants. The non-words illustrate that nasalized vowels do not eventually appear, nor do oral vowels occur before nasal consonants. These variants in our vowel production may not be known to us, but this is natural. The term nasalization does not affect its meaning whether we see or hear the vowel in being with or without the nose. So compare this with the change in vowel height. It's a difference if you want to say bead and say bed instead. The bead and the bed are sounds from several phonemes. So replace yourself and you have another word. So the bead and the nasal bead create no distinctions in meaning. So these sounds therefore relate the bead and the nasal bead. So okay, so similarly, English also contains a phonological rule that determines the context in which voiceless stops p, t, and k are aspirated. So here's the rule. Voiceless stops are aspirated when they occur initially in a stressed syllable. So where the unaspirated stops occur, the aspirated ones do not, and vice versa. So for table 6.2, it illustrates the distribution of aspirated stops versus unaspirated. So if you want, you might tell spit as um, spit with an aspirated p, and that would be understood as spit. But here is the thing that we might spit your words out since aspiration is an important distinction. So we do not notice as far as the consonant really is concerned. So thus there is one phoneme which can be pronounced p or p depending on the phonetic context p, an abstract voiceless belabor stops. So as a third illustration of allophones, consider the voiceless alveolar stops too along with the following examples. So okay, so here hmm, I see thick and stick, blitz, butter, and okay. So we normally get a okay. So in stick we normally find an aspirated t, whereas stick and blitz we find an unaspirated t, and in bitter we find the flapped r or bitter. Swapping these sounds around will not change word meaning. So if we pronounce bitter with t, it will not change the word. It will simply sound unnatural to most, of course, to most American. Okay, so how to find phonemes. Phonemes are the dark phonological substance, so they are not directly observable physical sounds. They are abstract mental image of a language units of phonology which are utilized to represent words in our mind. So in order to determine the pronunciation of words, phonemes are subject to phonemic language rules. So the process of substituting one sound for another in a word to see if it makes a difference is a good way to identify the phonemes of language. So here are 12 words differing only in their vowels. So we have here the beat, bit, bait or bet, and bot, and bite. So any of the two of these form a minimal pair. So two different words that differ in one sound in the same possession. So the two sounds that cause the word difference belong to different phonemes. So the pair bid and bid are not different words. They are variants of the same word. So therefore, E and E do not belong to different phonemes. They are two actualizations of the same phoneme. So our minimal pair analysis has revealed 11 monophthongs and 3 diphthongs vowel, namely E, E and E, A, U, U, O, U, and A, U, and I, OW, and OI. This set may differ somewhat to other variants of English. Importantly, each of these vowel phonemes has at least two allophones, so two ways of being pronounced orally. Okay, so a particular realizations of a phoneme is called a phone. Okay, so the aggregate of phones that are the realizations of the same phoneme are called the allophones of that phoneme. So in English, each vowel phoneme has both an oral and nasalized allophone, so the choice of the allophone is not random or haphazard, it is a rule governed. Okay, so complementary distributions. Minimal pairing show that some language speech sounds are contrasting and can be utilized to construct separate sounds. So, or separate words like huge and grave. The contrast group into the phonemes of that language. So some sounds are not transparent and cannot be utilized for other words. As examples which do not contrast in English, the sounds of th and alone are citations. So for oral vowels occur, nasal vowels do not occur, and vice versa. In this sense, the phones are said to be complement to each other, to be a complementary distribution. So, complementary distribution is a fundamental concept of phonology, and interestingly enough, it shows up in everyday life. So, here are a couple of examples. So, I'm going to show you some examples that draw on the common experience of reading and writing English. Okay, so the the first the first example focuses on printed letters, such as are those that appear in the pages of this book. Each printed letter of English has two main variants, so lowercase and uppercase, or capital. If we restrict our attention to words that are not proper names or acronyms, such as RON or the UNICEF, we can formulate a simple rule that does not fear of determining how letters will be printed. So the rule is a letter is printed in uppercase if it is the first letter of a sentence, or otherwise it is printed in lowercase. So even ignoring names and acronyms, this rule is only approximately right, but let's go with it anyway. It helps to explain why written sentences such as the following appears strange. So this is a sentence. Okay. So here, the lowercase and the uppercase forms of an English letter are distributed as complements as far as the rule is accurate. So the uppercase variance takes place in one circumstances, so or in particular at the beginning of the sentence. So whereas in every other circumstances, the lowercase variant takes place beginning of the sentence, whereas in every other circumstances, the lowercase variant takes place or elsewhere. Every letter in English alphabet has hence two variants or allographs which appear in which various written context, much like every English vowel phoneme has an oral and nasalized allophone. So in both circumstances, there is complementary distribution of the two versions, phoneme or letter, or of a single mental representation, as they never exist in the same setting, and replacing the nasal vowel instead of the nasal vowel, or the top letter instead of the lowercase, may sound or appear unusual, but the meaning of what is spoken or written is not changed, and it does not change that. So our second example is cursive handwriting, which you have probably mastered in primary school. Writing in cursive is somehow more analogous to the act of speaking than printing. So since Each letter of a word in cursor writing usually as nearby sounds connect or during speech, so connects to the subsequent letter. So the following figure illustrates that the connections between the letters of a word in cursive writing create different variants of a letter in different environments. So the need for the similarity didn't okay, so they don't contrast with each other when sounds are in complementary distribution. The substitution of one sound for the other does not change the significance of a word. So although it may not sound like a standard English wording, even the facts about the pattern of sounds in a language, a phoneme can be considered as an underlying complementary distribution of a phonetically related series or of sounds. A set can only consist one member as only one sound updates. A phoneme in all situations it has um, one language sound. Complementary distribution alone is not enough to measure the allophones. If several allophones are present in the set, so phonetic parallels must also be used. That is, the majority of phonetic features are used. In English, the velar is complementary to the glottal fricative, is not word induced and is not word initially present, but they have very few phonetic characteristics. So trust is voice velar's nasal stop, so therefore allophones with the same phoneme and allophones with separate phonemes. So lastly, language speakers usually view a single phoneme as different allophones as the same sound or telephone. So for example, most English speakers do not know that vowels are separate telephones because they make phonemes and hear not phones. So that would be all. So the next discussion will be presented to my group mate. So thank you and God bless. Keep safe and goodbye.